Welcome back. This is the moment that we've all been waiting for, or at least certainly me. So I've seen a lot of interest though and comments specific to my turntable journey. And isn't it fitting that the very first time on YouTube that I declared that I was going to get a new turntable was part of my New Year's resolutions video, which was at the beginning of this year, and I was in this very location. My first video that I'd ever made outside of my own sort of primary home. So isn't it fitting that I'm back here to actually give you an update purely by coincidence? What I want to address here in this video is my decision-making process, and I am going to tell you what I went with. Basically what happened is I've purchased my turntable. I took it home yesterday. It's currently sitting in my living room, and yet I had plans this weekend, and so it's not even hooked up yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm doing two videos. The first one is talking to you about my consideration set, and that is what this video is. And then my second one that I'm going to post later is more about, well, how it sounds and the results. Because here's the thing, I'm all in. I already bought it, right? It's already done. There's no going back. So anyway, that is what we're going to get into with this video, what I went with in my decision-making process. So without further ado, as always, hit like, hit subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever I post a video. And of course, you can follow me on Instagram at what_can_brown. Okay, so firstly, I know that whatever I choose, right, I'm going to be disappointing like 95% of you, or maybe everyone. And that isn't to say that your recommendations weren't helpful. They definitely were. And actually, I had many of your recommendations in my consideration set, not even beforehand, but I'm saying because you made these recommendations of the turntables that you all have and your process and your journey, I was able to add a bunch of others to my consideration set and kind of figure out what I wanted to get. But also know there really wasn't that much consistency in your recommendations. And in fact, no one mentioned the turntable that I ended up going with. And so that's why I say maybe no one will be satisfied with my decision. If there was consistency in terms of your recommendations, it was this. People love one of really two turntables. There's the direct drive Technics folks, and then there's the Rega sort of P model turntable folks, whether the P3 or the 6, the 8 or the 10. And I'm going to get into some of the reasons why I went with neither of those, right? Now, what I will say is that, out of the recommendations that I received on the Technics side, a lot of people referenced the SL1000. Also received recommendations on the SL1210GR, the SL1200, and I guess the SL1200 MK2. Now, of course, this wasn't a vote. It's not like I asked everyone to, and the most people who said a certain model was going to win. That's not how this went. But you have to acknowledge, I think, that as much as everyone is very passionate about what they went with, right? So all of you all evaluated, turntables, and you went with what sounded best to you. And so I'm not saying that anybody's wrong with the recommendation. I just want to acknowledge that as much as there is objectivity to this process, that there's also just a ton of subjectivity that's associated with experience and preference, even what features that you find most important, right? Because people weight these different things in their minds differently. And honestly, my guess is that Technics people and Rega people are very likely not the same people, right? You're probably naturally inclined to one or the other, or, and I'm not saying everybody has to be either a Technics person or a Rega person, but those are for sure the most recommended tables. And they're very different tables as well. I did want to mention as well that some of the other ones that were recommended were by Clear Audio and Torrens and U-Turn and Pure Fidelity, and others, right? So there's just a number of turntables that people recommended. And always the challenge with anybody who doesn't have experience with every single one of them is that, what am I supposed to do? Just take your word for it. Obviously I'd love to be able to, to be able to hear every single one, but I can't. All right. So the main categories or features that I was weighing with my decision. And I know I'm prolonging me telling you what I went with. But that's, I mean, the point of this video is not just telling you what it is. It's the thought process. You can always skip ahead. So the main categories that or features that I wanted to weigh are a couple of things, right? So one is the question of direct drive versus belt drive turntable. So that's the first thing. The second thing is how much is it important to be able to make some of these fine adjustments to the setup. So what I'm talking about here is Azimuth and VTA, and obviously anti-skate and tracking force, but those are going to be a little bit more standard across a variety of turntables. But really VTA and Azimuth, I think were some of the things that I was interested in sort of some of these fine adjustments. The next thing is how could I possibly manage having multiple cartridges? So one of the things that people said, regardless of what turntable that I went with, is both that I should get moving coil, but also that I need to get a dedicated mono cart and be able to have that option for mono records, right? The next thing is the next consideration is the aesthetic of the turntable, or really like the design, like what style do I want? And some people would say, oh, you shouldn't, who cares about that? But I mean, if you have to be staring at something for hours and hours when you're listening to music, I think it is it's an important part of the consideration set. It's not the most important, but it's a part of it. And then finally, cost. So if you're following me, we've got, direct drive versus belt drive. You got the fine-tuned sort of adjustments. You've got how to handle multiple cartridges, the aesthetic, and then the cost, right? So those are the primary considerations that I had, and maybe I'm missing something that others feel is very important, but those to me are kind of some of the most important. I mean, obviously, how does it sound? But again, if you can't actually hear all of the turntables, how are you supposed to figure that out? You can't demo everything. And I did demo a few different turntables, by the way. So I want to address each of these in just a little bit of detail. All right. So first, the question of direct drive or belt drive. Generally speaking, I am a belt drive person. Okay. Part of the reason is that I've always had vintage equipment up until this point, right? I've always had a vintage turntable. I've had what did I have? A Sansui, or was it a Sanyo? I think it was a Sanyo. And then I've had I had this old POS like before, and lately, I've had this Marantz 6200. Here's the thing. I like the vintage look. That has nothing to do with belt drive versus direct drive, but I do like the vintage look, and vintage tables are exclusively belt drive. But more practically, on some direct drive turntables, you have to worry about motor noise and vibration, whereas you don't on a belt drive turntable. Now, most people who are direct drive people will say that it takes too long for a table to get up to speed, for a belt drive turntable to get up to speed. And I'm going to say that is like 100% BS, or at least like 90% BS. Maybe on some super heavy platter tables that are belt drive, that it takes a little bit longer for it to get up to speed. And I've seen those too. And there's some where people almost have to give it a little bit of a push or something in order for it to get up to speed. But not on most. Most belt drive turntables don't take any time at all to get up to speed, and that's never been an issue. It's not like I'm standing there looking at my watch or anything. It's I don't perceive that to be an issue. But again, I'm also used to belt drive turntables, so I don't think that that's as much of an issue. But I also know that some of you who are direct drive people may say that that the idea that there's motor noise is BS. But here's the thing. The bottom line for me is that I want to prioritize sound. And if I'm spending money on a nice turntable, I don't want the possibility of motor noise. And I'm definitely not DJing with it, right? Which for me, it feels like is where direct drive has the most benefit. Plus, I have to be honest, I just don't like the look of DJ turntables at all. And then that gets into the aesthetic kind of design thing and not the belt drive versus direct. But when I hear people advocating for direct drive, in my mind, I hear Technics, and I just don't like the look of Technics turntables. All right, so I know in some of my comments there's probably some of it was controversial, but here's the thing: is that, like I said, there's objectivity and there's subjectivity, and I have the two together, right? That are going to be part of my consideration set. So it is what it is. But let's move on to the next category. So the adjustments, these like fine-tune adjustments. Now, not every turntable has the ability to adjust VTA or vertical tracking angle, right? Which some people call like vertical height adjustment. I think I've heard it termed. And then there's azimuth, right? So azimuth is the angle that your cartridge takes relative to the record's like vertical grooves. So these adjustments do indeed impact audio clarity and stereo separation. And to be fair, maybe more applicable or more of importance to higher end cartridges, but maybe not. So, the adjustments that most turntables can make include tracking weight, but not every turntable offers that. I think one of the turntables that I've encountered, because somebody asked me to like give them feedback on whether it was a good turntable, was the Audio-Technica LP like 60 model, which does not allow tracking weight. And by the way, I brought a gram scale over to somebody's house that had one of those turntables, and it, like the standard was like, or what it was set at was like 7 grams of tracking pressure, which is way too much. So in any event, not every turntable offers tracking weight adjustment, and that's important, but for every turntable that I was considering, it was certainly part of it. And then anti-skate is the other one, and I feel like that's a little bit of a given. So anti-skate is like balancing the force on the inner and the outer groove walls, right? But when you're spending good money on a nice cartridge, I think that you want the ability to make all the adjustments in order to optimize sound and really get the most out of your gear. And guess what? You cannot adjust VTA or azimuth with a Rega P3. And in fact, Rega tone arms do not allow this. It's something to do with, I had to look it up because I was like, why doesn't it do that? It's something to do with like the upper and lower braces between the arm base and the main bearing. I don't really know that much about it, but basically people compensate for the fact that it doesn't allow this by shimming the tone arm base or shimming the cartridge. Now, you can adjust these, you can make some of these fine-tune adjustments with the Technics SL 1200 MK2, and I believe other Technics models, but we've already established that I don't like direct drive and I don't like the look of Technics. All right. So those are two of the considerations, and I hope you're following me. And I know the more that I talk, the more people I'm going to rile up, right? Because the equipment crowd is everybody just has really strong opinions about this, and they don't like trust anybody else's decision making. They only trust theirs. So that's what I'm fighting against here. So I want to address the dedicated mono cart now. This is like the toughest part of my entire consideration set. Okay. Because it was hard to find a solution. And there's lots of variables. So let's get into this. So I need the ability to play mono and stereo records. Okay. And I want to do it to the best of their ability. Now, what that means, as I understand it, is I need a dedicated mono cart, because that's everybody's been telling me that's like the first thing that I need to make sure I do. But then I also need a stereo cart. So basically I need dedicated cartridges depending on the format that I'm playing. Now, there's a few ways to achieve that, right? But unpacking that takes some turntables off the turntable. So how big of an issue is this for me, you might ask? If many of you out there buy mostly new records, you probably don't have a huge percentage of your collection that's in mono format. Well, guess what? A huge percentage of my collection is original pressings, and at least half of my records are mono. I have not done the calculation, and Discogs doesn't allow you to like filter for that, right? So first, how do you play mono and stereo? Well, traditionally, what I've done, some people just use a stereo cartridge, right? You wouldn't just use a mono cartridge, but some people will just use a stereo cartridge, and that includes myself. Thus far, I've just used the same stereo cartridge, and at the moment, that's a moving magnet, Nagaoka MP200. And how I switch to toggle between stereo and mono is, well, a switch. There's a switch on my preamp, right? I don't have an external switch. I know that those are available. I know that people build their own. I get it. But my preamp has one. So that's how I've done it. I'm trying to move away from this and get a dedicated mono cart, as I've said. Just like biggest piece of feedback that I've received. In fact, if I heard anything loud and clear, it's not only a dedicated mono cart, it's making sure that it's moving coil. So how do you use separate cartridges? Well, the most obvious thing is to simply switch between your stereo and your mono cartridge. However, taking one off of your turntable or of your head shell or of your turntable and putting another one on takes time, right? So, what I mean by that is you're like unscrewing it and then you're fully setting up the next cartridge in terms of setting the tracking weight and like all the alignment kind of stuff. It basically means, in effect, you'd be playing stereo records for like a month or something, right? Just to avoid the hassle of having to swap, to then eventually swap because you have some mono records that you want to hear, and then you're going to be playing that for a period of time because you want to avoid the hassle. I did not want the format, stereo versus mono, to dictate which records that I was going to play. Like I didn't want that like whole process to dictate whether I decided I was going to listen to a mono or a stereo record. All right, so let's talk about the other options, because there's other options here, right? It can't just be that you have to unscrew a cartridge and screw on another one. So another option is I could have multiple turntables, right? One for each cartridge. So I have one with the mono, one with the stereo, and it's great, right? In fact, for what I spent on my turntable, I would have been able to buy 2 P3s and outfit one with each type of cartridge, but without some of those adjustments, etc. So I could also have a single turntable with multiple tone arms on it. They make those. I'm sure you've seen them. Not many people have them, certainly not that many people in the vinyl community, because guess what? They're very expensive. I think the entry point, this is probably wrong, by the way, but it feels like to me the entry point for like a decent multi-tone arm table is like $8,000. And they definitely go up and up and up, beyond that. All right, so there's a few other ways that you could do this. You could do a swap. You could have a swappable tone arm, right? So you have your turntable and you have a tone arm with, like a fixed turntable head shell integrated kind of thing, and then you just take off the tone arm and put another one on. It involves a lot of setup, and then you can also have a swappable head shell, not with the Rega tone arm, but with other tone arms. You can have a swappable head shell. So like I said, the Rega ones, to my understanding, unless you're going to upgrade that tone arm to something else than what it comes with, Rega tone arms have fixed head shells, so they're not swappable. So you'd have to swap the tone arm, and that would obviously involve the setup work. You could maybe find like this is something that I haven't even like fully researched. It's possible you could find a cartridge that allows you to just swap out the stylus between mono and stereo. But I'm actually not even aware of whether or not that's an option. Because it feels to me like the companies that make dedicated mono carts are not in the business of wanting you to be able to just swap out the stylus, from the cartridge, right, and just kind of sliding it in and out. All right, so what I want to address across some of this commentary is basically a few things. That I didn't want to do multiple turntables, even acknowledging that that I could do that. I could get a couple of P3s, but I wanted to maximize the quality of the turntable and not have to sacrifice the quality of the turntable by trying to afford multiple turntables. I didn't want to do the multiple tone arms because of the setup. That's a big thing for me. Ease of use is critical for me. Right. So let's talk swappable head shell. So if you're going to do a swappable head shell, to do this, you need a tone arm that allows it. And typically how you do this is by unscrewing the head shell from the tone arm and then putting the other one on. So the Technics SL1000 has the ability to have a swappable, unscrew the head shell, and probably other Technics turntables as well. But the other important part of this is that you need one company probably that makes both the stereo and the mono cartridge. So you don't have the ability to just pick any mono cart out there and any stereo cart, because they need to be similar or equal weight so that you aren't having to redo like the tracking force and everything. and similar kind of like alignment too. And so the best way it feels like to me in order to accomplish this is to be able to go with one manufacturer that offers both a dedicated mono, a mono cart as well as a stereo cart. And then obviously the other factor that you need here is you need an extra head shell, an identical head shell to what comes on your turntable. You need the exact same thing for all the same sort of alignment and weight reasons that I said. So to recap, you want to only have to set it all up once, have all factors be equal in terms of weight and alignment and everything in order for a swappable head shell to like really get its full benefit. Okay, so if you're following, I've basically crossed off Rega because it doesn't offer the swappable head shell. And I've crossed off Technics because it's direct drive. I don't like the look. I'm not saying they're not great tables. I'm not saying there aren't options. In fact, for the same kind of reasons that I just stated, like the Technics offers a better ability to do the swappable head shell thing, certainly than the Rega. Now, unless cost compels me to sacrifice what the optimal solution is and go with something that doesn't satisfy every requirement, right? So, I could say that, I'm crossing these off because it doesn't meet every requirement, but obviously cost plays a role. Obviously it does. Because if it was a $20,000 solution to get everything I want, then I would say, you know what? I can stand to look at a Technics, or I'll buy 2 P3s in order to get what I want. But again, that's not what I did. So let's talk about cost really quick. So I already said I didn't want to get a multi-tone arm table due to the cost. I frankly also didn't want to sacrifice the quality of the table by getting multiple tables, by being able to afford multiple tables that fit within my budget. Now I could have bought one now and wait, and get another one in a couple of years, but I didn't do that. Plus the extra table takes up space, as I said. I also wanted the look that I wanted as well. So, okay, so the look, I already said I didn't like the look of DJ tables. I also don't frankly really like the modern glass or like painted, kind of look that so many tables out there have either. And I really wanted, I like the vintage look. So what did I get? Okay, so I decided I wanted to prioritize a single turntable that meets all of my criteria and spend a little bit more so that I could get one of high quality with high quality cartridges. Way more expensive than anything I've ever purchased in terms of a cartridge and certainly a turntable. Now, it could very well be that all of my criteria that I've referenced in this video can be satisfied with different turntable options. However, where I landed is the Luxman PD151 Mark II. All right. So Mark II came out, I think, like a couple of years ago, and previously they were just going with the PD151. And this is, again, it's just the Mark II variety. So that's what I got. Now, the cartridge solution that I went with is both a Hanna SL stereo cartridge and a Hanna SL mono cartridge. Plus, I had to get a second head shell so that both cartridges are always installed onto a head shell, and I can swap between them just by unscrewing one and screwing the other one on. A Luxman. So what the hell is a Luxman, you might ask? In fact, I'm sure you're going to ask that because as far as I can tell, it's made in Japan and is more respected there and perhaps in Europe, but they haven't made as much headway in the US. From what I can tell, there's very few people. There are people in the vinyl community on YouTube that have the Luxman turntables and they love them, but it's certainly not common. I also hear that there's obviously benefits in just having this particular turntable, but those benefits are amplified if you get the Luxman amplifier. See what I did there? Which I don't have, and frankly, at the moment, I'm not considering, but perhaps at some point in the future. So, a Luxman PD151 that most people haven't heard. That's where I ended up. And I was able to preview this turntable. I did hear it at my local hi-fi shop, which is where I ended up purchasing this thing. So I'm not going into this blind. I have heard it. I have compared it to other modern turntable options. And that's what I went with. But what you're going to wonder, of course, is how does it sound? And tell me more about this turntable. Well, those are the topics that I'm going to leave for my next video once I actually have this thing set up in my home. So it took a lot of time for us to get here, both in terms of this video as well as time in terms of the calendar, because I made my New Year's resolution video at the very beginning of January, as I said, from this very location that I'm in right now. And here we are at the end of April. So some of the reasons why it took me so long is both finding a solution, but also completing my auctions. And I've actually not completed my auctions. So what I stated in January was that I was going to conduct 5 auctions, 100 records apiece, and that was going to fund this entire thing. And guess what? 4 auctions through, I'm about $12,000 in income, not profit, but income. So I've more than funded. Well, significantly more than funded my final solution here. But I did want to try to get through as many auctions as I possibly could to make myself go through the pain of selling the records before I would get the reward of the turntable. It was just like a self-punishment kind of thing. So that's why it took a little bit of time. But here we are. I'm super excited to have this turntable, and I'm excited to spin stuff on it. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to wait a few days because I have to get home in order to do so. So, as I said up front, probably pleasing no one with my decision. But what I am interested in, as always, is one thing I do know is that I'm not the only person who is trying to come up with a solution based on this criteria, especially the stereo and the mono ability. People who collect vintage jazz or older stuff that's like pre, 1960, which ends up being a lot of jazz people, have a lot of mono records. And so the ability to do this swappable thing, and I know a lot of people have chosen to go with multiple turntables. There's other people that are in this space with me. So if you don't understand why someone would need a dedicated mono cart, then I don't even care what you think. But again, I know that there's a lot of people. I know there's a lot of people who are in this mindset who want to prioritize the best sounding mono, the best sounding stereo. This is a solution that I went with. And tell me if you think that I missed something, or that I mischaracterized something, or there should have been a different turntable. I know there's going to be people who say that I could have spent less money on a turntable solution that offers me everything I wanted. And I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that. It's just that I heard what this turntable is capable of. And it seems like a really high quality build, and I love the look of it. And it offers me everything I want. And so I'm not being talked out of the purchase that I just made, but I am interested in other people who have come up with a solution. Leave it in the comments, because it may help the next person who has the same question that I had from the outset of how do I do all of this with a single turntable solution. So thanks very much for tuning in, and keep an eye out for that next video where hopefully I tell you the turntable in my room sounds amazing. So thanks everyone. I'll see you next time.